We're 2 months into the new year, whether you can believe it or not. And this morning, Governor Josh Green joins us in studio to discuss the issues he's making a top priority right now. Good morning, Governor. Thank you once again for joining us.
Great to be here.
I know you just got back from Maui, did a lot of different things over there, talking about housing. You mentioned you met with Lahaina Strong,
yes.
Which there's been a little bit of tension there.
Hey, it's all love.
All love now.
Yeah, well, look, the challenge with a crisis like this is there's so many issues. There's moving parts to the recovery. People have deeply felt and very importantly honest feelings about the injustices of generations past, and that drives a lot of this, and that's what we were talking about yesterday. From a practical standpoint on Maui yesterday, it was great. We were over at Kapalua. A gentleman who is very affluent from Japan was helping us build houses. So we dropped in the first 2 houses, $80,000 each for these tiny little houses. We're gonna bring in 50, and then I'll push for 200. Actually, we're gonna jump ahead a couple trips I have to make. Gonna go to Japan in March and seek hundreds and hundreds of houses with the ambassador from the US to Japan. That's Rahm Emanuel. So housing is a key issue. As you know, 3,000 families or households were displaced. About 2,000, just a little under 2,000 now are still in hotels, and we have to move them to long-term housing, long-term rentals. The thing that was quite striking in talking to Lahaina Strong, and I really appreciated meeting with these 3 young leaders, was that we agree completely that we have a crisis with short-term rentals. Right now, there are 31,000 short-term rentals on Maui alone. Most of them are illegal. We should pull back on the illegal ones. We should pull back on the number of units that people from the mainland own and get those into circulation to house our people. We agree totally on that. Now, there's some good news. FEMA has 1,500 units, but they're not all in West Maui, which means that some people are wrestling with whether they can commute and whether they're close enough to take their kids to school. That's the kind of stuff we do day to day, but I have to build housing, and I'm going to bring in 475 transitional houses. That's going to go to Lei'ili'i, but lots to share in the coming weeks and months. We need to build several thousand units, and Senator Schatz and the congressional delegation are helping push hard. Also, when I land in Washington, D.C. tomorrow, I'll have a series of meetings from the president on down at the cabinet level to talk to Pete Buttigieg, to talk to the FEMA folks again, as we always talk, to get those resources for Hawaii, because we have to build housing.
I know you and Pete Buttigieg are actually going to be kind of swapping places, maybe overlapping in the air, you going to D.C. later today. He is coming here. He'll be actually landing on Maui, I believe, tomorrow.
Yes.
So since you won't be there for that visit on Maui, is there anything that you're hoping that people here that are representing you during the time are making sure he sees?
Absolutely. So I will actually see Pete back in his office on Friday in D.C., and he and I are friends. So the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, can bring hundreds of millions of dollars to us. We'd like to see more than $500 million of infrastructure, and that means new water lines, power. We're going to need all that infrastructure to build in Lahaina. And that's all in addition to pulling back from the short-term rental crisis. So Pete knows what we need. I've already, we're in a text message kind of relationship, so I've already asked him for what we kind of have to have, but he'll be there taken around by people like Luke Myers, who's my recovery coordinator. Of course, the mayor will be there, and we have a whole fleet of people that will show him kind of the ropes here. He's very familiar with what our needs are, though.
Awesome. And I was talking about rebuilding. You've signed the Hawaii Project Labor Agreement, which taps into that local labor market. Can you tell us anything about that, any updates and how that pertains to rebuilding and building houses?
Sure. So as you know, housing is my top priority for our administration. We have the emergency proclamation in place. We also have this labor agreement so that people will get livable wages, living wages when they work. They get prevailing wages. They get to have that protection because they are part of the union, but also it expedites projects so that there won't be any concerns ever about strikes or work stoppages or anybody taking advantage of our workers. We have so many thousands of units that we need to build in our state. We also have to build the stadium because we want to start kicking butt on the football field with a new stadium. There's lots of things that are big projects, and this is kind of a continuation from what was done back in 2012. So I'm a big fan of labor being efficient and protecting our workers. That's what that was. You know, we have to be serious about housing, and that's why we're under these emergency rules. But things settle down. You know, we're not in conflict with the environmental community at all. In fact, I fancy myself very environmentally savvy, because I've been around long enough to see that we got to protect conservation lands. But at the same time, our local families have often left Hawaii. We saw that in a report a couple days ago, that we've had a net loss of population over the last 5 years. And that includes still people moving here because we're desirable. So housing, homelessness, you've seen us do a lot on homelessness recently. We've opened 2 kauhale, one at Middle Street, one over in Kaneohe, and it's just amazing to see that going. I also convinced the federal government once and for all that housing is healthcare, so they're now allowing us to use Medicaid funds for 8 states across the country to house people. So you will see an enormous change in the way we deal with homelessness, getting people who are suffering chronic disease, mental illness, drug addiction off of the streets. We're in partnership with Mayor Blangiardi and all the mayors, but Mayor Blangiardi in particular here will be opening and making a big announcement in early March of kind of a triage center down in Iwalei. I'll give you more details and walk you through that then. These are big moves to help society, but at the end of the day, it's only affordable to live in Hawaii if you can find a home.
Right. Governor, I do have one more question for you before you leave us this morning. Last week, we of course learned the circumstances surrounding the death of 10-year-old Gianna Bradley. Unfortunately, this case bears a lot of similarities to Isabella Kalua, who disappeared 3 years ago. How do cases like these change how we are trying to protect Hawaii's keiki?
So what I've done is I've asked our Director of Human Services to do a comprehensive review of how often we check in with kids, with our keiki. What happens is there is tragically evil out there, and also some people have such damage, they've been so traumatized in their lives, and they become addicts. They are unable to really safely raise children in some rare circumstances that they do harm to children. So we have to have our eyes on children. That means pediatrician visits and school checks. A lot of times what you see is kids get pulled out of school, and when they're out of school, it's out of sight, out of mind. And that's when these tragic cases occur. So I've asked our director to find a way so that we have very regular eyes on all of our keiki, no matter what. People do have a right to educate their children outside the public school system. I mean, I love the public school system for our kids, but people can choose what they're going to do, but they can't choose to hurt a child. And so there are thousands and thousands of extraordinary successful cases and successful events where our department has cared for children, made sure they were safe. But there are cases also where the tragedies occur. And so we have to have our eyes on those kids. It's a problem with humanity, if you want to know. I'm trying to restore some balance to society. When too many people are living in deep poverty, we know that it's big numbers. 63% of all the Hawaiian community, 44% of everybody statewide are living in deep poverty. They struggle. That means people self-medicate. Sometimes they harm one another. That's why violence occurs, desperation, addiction. So as we make a difference in society by having more doctors and nurses and better wages, all these things that we kind of talked about up front, you will see decreases in the overall amount of violence. But it's not easy, and there are always a few people that will do a terrible thing. That's why we see our hearts break when someone gets hurt, like that woman when that terrible incident occurred when someone threw acid on her, or when these gunshot victims occur. That kind of violence, it's got no place in society, but usually it's rooted in untreated mental illness. And that's where I, as a physician governor, will put a lot of my focus.
Well, thank you so much, Governor, for joining us this morning. Of course, we wish you a safe flight and safe trip to DC.
Thanks so much.